Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. A common thing I hear from independent consultants is that they need to improve their messaging or improve their positioning or improve their messaging and positioning. And they tell me that just generally when I ask, what do you need to improve in their business? They say this. Or when I say, what needs to happen in order to improve your pipeline or increase the value of your pipeline? They say, well, one of the things is I need to improve my messaging. I need to improve my positioning. And you might be relating to this too. You might be thinking that this is a critical success factor right now, and everything is kind of stopped until you address it. Or you might be someone who has this kind of under the radar as a constant talk track in your mind of one of those things that needs to get done, but you never get to. And today I want to tackle that in this episode 268 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I want to tackle this so that you know and can discern when your messaging is something that truly needs to be addressed versus when you're using it as an excuse to do more impactful things in your business. And it's actually causing delays. It's causing you to leave money on the table because you think this is a problem and it really shouldn't be your main focus. So I want to help you parse these two things out so that you know what to be focused on so that at the end of the day, you can building your reputation for what it is you do and make it easier to create leads for yourself in your pipeline. All right, with that, let's talk about today's agenda. First, I'll share with you the companion resource that will help you put this episode into action. Then we'll talk about something I call the refinement loop, what that is and why it's potentially a problem for you in your business. Then we'll talk about understanding what is the difference between having a messaging problem and actually something else that could be the actual root cause that you want to address, what this is costing you, and then how to identify when your messaging actually needs work. So I'll help you unpack all of this and by the end, give you specific steps to put this episode into action. So when you think about messaging, ask yourself right now, as I ask you this question and answer it, what are your thoughts about the quality of your messaging and positioning? If you had to give it a rating right now, what would that be on a scale of 1 to 10? And then based on that number, why did you give yourself that number? And then the last question is, why do you think it matters? Let's say that you gave yourself a 5 out of 10 for messaging and positioning. And the reason why is because you feel like it's not clear enough. You get a lot of questions after you say what you do, and it should be more clear and not have as many questions. Why does that matter? So, based on those answers, a lot of times we think that having a better message, a better position, a more clear messaging and positioning will ultimately improve our pipeline, right? That's why we ultimately typically care about those things. That we think it will make it easier for clients to find us. We think it will make it easier for potential clients to understand what we do. It's easier for people to refer clients to us, all of those things, right? Of course, when we think that our pipeline isn't where we want it to be, when we know that our pipeline isn't where we want it to be, and then we think, well, I better go improve my messaging and positioning. This is often one of the first stops that I hear from independent consultants thinking oh, that's the thing I need to fix first. But it's likely that you're solving the wrong problem. And so in this episode, I'm going to show you how to diagnose which problem you actually have and understand when your messaging genuinely needs work or not, and then what to fix when it doesn't. You don't have a lot of time in your day to work on your business. You're working with clients. Hopefully, you've got some clients on your roster, if not fully utilized. And we want to help you make the most of your time that you have available to work on the business and not spending it on activities that are not as valuable to you in the long run. Okay? So, first, I thought I would share just my own personal experience with this because there was a period in time in my consulting business that this felt top of mind, right? Well, when I very first started, I was getting clients from my network, from my warm network. But then when I realized, okay, I really want to turn this into a business, probably 2 or 3 years, after I had originally started, I decided I really want to turn this into a business. And then the first thing I thought, like you might be thinking, is I better figure out what my messaging and positioning is. At the time, I was a consultant helping startup scale, mostly as a fractional COO. And so I was like, okay, I've got to go update my LinkedIn profile. And do I need a website? Like, those are the normal things that we would often think to ourselves, right? How do I create an elevator pitch? All of those things. So I spent so much time working on these assets, working on my LinkedIn profile, working on my elevator pitch, questioning if I needed a website. I started down the path of making a WordPress website, which is hideous, absolutely hideous. And trying to figure out how to set that all up was a terrible use of my time. And when I was doing all of those things, of course, I wasn't reaching out to potential leads. I wasn't talking to people in my warm network. I wasn't talking to the people who probably understood what I did and what my talents and gifts were in corporate better than I did because they had worked with me and they weren't in my own head. I wasn't doing any of that. I was, behind my computer working on all of these things that I thought I needed, capability decks and LinkedIn headlines and elevator pitches. And I told myself it was strategic, right? I mean, who would start a business and not have all of these things in place? I thought, you need to look polished. You're selling to corporate clients, I thought. And so as a result, I spend so much time trying to nail all of this down, to perfect the messaging, to figure out how to describe what I do what I did at the time in a clear way that matched up to my ideal client profile. I took courses, went to webinars. I mean, I did so many things trying to get my messaging and positioning to a place that felt like I was quote unquote ready to start talking to potential clients. But the actual truth is, I could have spent half a day on all of those things at most and nailed them good enough, right? What I was actually doing was avoiding the thing that scared me, which was putting myself out there to potential clients with no longer a corporate name behind me, questioning if they were questioning if I was like a corporate dropout. I couldn't hack it, so I had to do this on my own. Worrying about, would I propose the right thing? Would I price it the right way? Would I articulate it in a way that felt valuable to them? All of those fears of not being able to articulate and show value to a potential client had me focused on staying behind the curtain and working on all these things that felt productive. But at the end of the day, we're actually just delaying the inevitable, which was I needed to go out and talk to real people, real ideal clients, real people who worked with ideal clients, channels, my warm network, all the people that I could leverage those conversations to not only potentially uncover work, but also to create more clarity through action. That's where the clarity comes from. I finally figured that out, but that was only after having updated my LinkedIn profile literally every single day for probably 2 months. And so, if any of this sounds familiar to you, this is why I'm recording this episode for you to help you avoid that trap, whether you're kind of in it in a large way, that's what you're doing and spending all of your time on, or whether you're a consultant who isn't necessarily doing anything about all of your messaging and positioning, spending all that time, like I just described, I was doing, but you're someone who's got it running under the current, if you will, constantly taunting you, saying, oh, this needs to be better. If only you had your elevator pitch more clear, you would be better at generating leads, and just constantly taunting you and you not acting on it because you're busy with other things or you're avoiding it, and it's sapping your energy. We don't want any of this. So that's what we're here for today. The companion resource that goes with today's episode is my book, Grow Your Consulting Business, the 14-Step Roadmap to Make Your Independent Consulting Goals a Reality. If you download it from my website, melissabook.com, which is MELISA book.com, or you can go to Amazon and buy the paper copy. Either way, I recommend both, but either way, you can download it for free or go grab it on Amazon. But go to chapter 6, which is all about your consulting portfolio, your messaging, your positioning, what you're offering, how it resonates with your ideal clients. Who are your ideal clients? It really helps you to clarify all of this once and for all so you can keep moving forward and not continue trying to over perfect something in a lab that ultimately at the end of the day you're going to have to change anyway. Okay, that's what the companion resource is. Okay, now let's talk about why this even matters. Why does this matter? Why does it matter that you might be worried about your messaging and positioning and spending a bunch of time addressing it, or not spending time, but criticizing yourself for this thing that needs to be done that's undone? Why does this matter? Well, of course, you can imagine that emotional energy that you're spending on this, whether you're either the actual time you're spending or the emotional time you're spending wasting because you're criticizing yourself, that dilutes your ability to be successful as a business owner, to be as impactful as you can be as a business owner. But beyond that, you're wasting time, right? You're either wasting time literally updating all of these assets all of the time and there's never good enough, or you're wasting time criticizing yourself or regretting the fact that you haven't done anything about it. You're spinning your wheels and ultimately you're delaying revenue and not solving your pipeline problem and not getting to the point where you can create a repeatable pipeline because you're so worried about this thing that it is impacting your ability to actually do the work that matters, talking to potential clients, refining your messaging through action. So that's why, of course, this matters. I invite you right now to decide in this episode, and I'll give you the tools to do that here as we talk, but to decide definitively, yes, I have a messaging and positioning opportunity that I need to address, and here's how I'm going to address it. And here's what success looks like. Or no, I don't have a messaging and positioning issue that's big enough to matter. And so I'm going to just call it done. It's good for now and move forward to a more consistent, more impactful lead generation process. So, as we go through this episode, ask yourself these questions and figure out which one of those two you are. And then we'll talk about what to do based on that answer at the end when I give you the next steps. Okay, let's talk about this refinement loop. I gave you a little bit of a taste of it with the story I described to you of my own refinement loop, but this is what it looks like. And you may be in this loop like very deeply or just more lightly, but at the end of the day, it's sucking time and energy from you. And that's the refinement loop looks like this. It doesn't look like avoidant. It really truly doesn't look like from the surface that you're avoiding something. It doesn't look like avoidance, but that's the problem. It's kind of like a hidden challenge because it looks like strategy. It looks like you're being smart. It looks like, oh, I've got a marketing department. That marketing department, you in your business of one, needs to produce some effective, polished output and assets. It looks like preparation. It looks like the responsible thing to do before going to market, even if you're brand new to consulting or going to market after you feel like you've taken on, kind of those initial projects from your warm network. And now you want to move on to start landing more of the type of client work you want to be landing. When you think that working on your messaging and positioning is the right strategy, of course, it could seem like that. And it can feel productive, right? You can actually see tangible outputs that you can point to. But at the end of the day, working and working and reworking and over analyzing and refining your messaging and positioning doesn't get you clients. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. We'll talk about what actually does get you clients. Because you might think, well, this is a prerequisite to getting clients, or I have to have this in order to know what clients to get. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. The refinement loop, why are you doing this? It's powered by a specific belief that if your messaging were better, the clients would come. And it's compelling because that is partially true. Messaging does matter. You hear the saying like a confused buyer doesn't buy, an unclear value proposition is going to cost you. And of course, those things are true to a degree. But the problem is actually in the wrong place when we think of it that way, when we think of it sequentially. When we think like, first I get my messaging and positioning nailed, and then the next step is I can start going to market and proactively generating leads. I don't want to waste my warm network and my relationships. I don't want to talk with them and waste those conversations by not being ready, by not having, clear messaging and positioning. Those are all the things we would say to ourselves. But the problem is in the wrong place when you think that the messaging is the prerequisite. Because as long as you believe the problem is in the words, then you're going to keep changing the words instead of changing your behavior. And the behavior that needs to change is to get to the place where you are know enough to be dangerous. You can describe what you do in a way that's enough to quote unquote be dangerous and get into action, having conversation, seeing what resonates with your ideal clients, with channel people, with people who would refer you to your ideal clients. And by using those conversations to refine your messaging and positioning and in a continuous improvement loop. Because when you're stuck in this refinement loop, trying to improve your messaging and positioning before you have conversations, it can feel like progress because you're producing those tangible things, but it doesn't produce the clients. Like the way of having conversations and refining the way you describe things, the way you approach your process through action. That's what we want to address here. We want to get out of the refinement loop and into the action loop. I'll give you another example. So I shared with you my story of this already. I'll give you another one. I was meeting with a consultant a few weeks ago, and she's been in business for nearly a decade. And she's built a $500,000 business entirely through word of mouth and referrals. And she came to me saying, okay, I want to grow the business to 1 million. And so I need to have, of course, more clients, a bigger pipeline to support that goal. And I said, okay, great. What do you think needs to happen in order to increase the size of your pipeline? And her answer is exactly what we're talking about on today's episode. Her answer is, well, I need to make my offer more clear. I need to have better messaging and positioning in order to double my pipeline, in order to double my revenue. And she was hesitant to pursue any more pipeline building opportunity beyond what she had been doing because she didn't feel like she had the right messaging yet. So I said, okay, no problem. Tell me what you do. Like, walk me through what you do, what you offer. And so, in about a course of, I don't know, a couple minutes, she described to me perfectly clear. I'm not in the space that she's in, but even as a layperson, as it relates to the type of consulting she does, I totally understood what she does and who she works with. She gave me 3 clear service areas that she supports, 3 clear service offerings, a clear ideal client profile, a client type, a natural entry point type offer, like a foot in the door type offer that made complete sense to me. And she's sold before. Like, there was literally nothing that was unclear to a person who's not even in the industry that she's in, knowing that the people who are in her industry can even pick that up more quickly and understand it in a way that then they ask follow-on questions and it sparks a conversation, right? So I told her that. I said, listen, I'm so confused right now. What you just told me seems perfectly clear to me. And I could literally see a shift in her face in that moment. And she said, well, the truth is, I'm nervous about reaching out to people. I'm nervous to talk with people in my network. And that was the truth, right? Because for 10 years, people found her, clients found her. She got referrals. She never had to initiate anything. And now, when she had hit this revenue ceiling that she couldn't break through and she wanted to double her business, the only path forward required her to do the one thing that, the one things she hadn't done before. And that's putting herself on the line, making herself more vulnerable, reaching out to people. Honestly, she hasn't even exhausted her warm network in this $500,000 business. But it required her to be proactive, for her to initiate these conversations, to her to rewarm her relationships. Her messaging was never the issue, but it was comfortable and it sounded smart, right? To herself too. She wasn't lying to me on purpose. She wasn't even lying to herself on purpose. But it's so easy to say, oh, the messaging is the problem because that feels so much less charged than the actual issue, which is having to talk with people, get their feedback, get their reaction, potentially be rejected, potentially be disappointed, potentially feel frustrated. Those are all the things that truly are what this surface level story of I want to improve my messaging and positioning is covering up the truth, which is I'm nervous to be putting myself into these conversations. And that's really what I'm avoiding. And that's the pattern I see constantly. We think our offer's unclear, our messaging needs work. We're not sure how to position things in a acceptable way. We don't think what we do lands with people, so we think we need to solve that. But the truth is, it's just a smokescreen for the reality, which is being nervous to talk to your ideal clients and put yourself on the line in a way that it might not resonate with them. They might not understand it. You might be one and done in a conversation, or you might be ghosted, or you might have a great conversation, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like those are the things that we actually want to solve for. And the messaging and positioning does not solve for those things, even though it seems like it would. So I'll tell you, let's talk more about what that means. How do you actually figure out what your problem is? Is it messaging or is it something else? Because in some cases, it is messaging and positioning, but most of the time it's not. So let's be more clear here. Before we talk about them, like figuring that out, let's just be really clear about what creates a pipeline, because that's ultimately why we're talking about this, right? When you want more clear messaging and positioning, like we were talking about a minute ago, the reason why is because you want a better pipeline. You want ideal clients in your pipeline and work that you can't wait to take on for amazing pricing, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so, in order to accomplish that, you need really two things. You need enough conversations and conversations that convert into opportunities and ultimately into clients. That's it. What a simple business model. It's so amazing. You need enough conversations and you need those conversations to convert. Everything else, your LinkedIn profile, your elevator pitch, your capability deck, your positioning statement, your value proposition, everything else exists to support one of those two things: having enough conversations and having those conversations convert. So that makes it simple for us to figure out when that's not working, when you don't have the pipeline you want to have, it makes it pretty simple to diagnose, right? The questions are you getting enough conversations? And are you getting conversations but not converting them? When you're not getting enough conversations, it's typically a value problem. We'll talk about what that is in a minute. And when you are getting conversations but not converting them, it's a conversion problem. And so we want to look at this to figure out for you how to figure out where the challenge is so you can address the right thing and not waste your time in the refinement loop. So before you're touching any messaging ever again, ask yourself this question: are you actually having enough conversations with ideal potential clients right now? If the answer is I'm not sure, you need to do your pipeline math. Just guessing how many conversations you should be having, not helpful. Just hoping you have enough conversations, not helpful. You need to do the actual math. So if you're not sure if you're having enough conversations, that's the first step. If the answer is no, I'm not having enough conversations with ideal potential clients right now because I know my pipeline math. So I know how many conversations I'm having. I know how much the math tells me I need to have. And you could do the difference really easily, right? If the answer is no, the solution is conversations, not rewrites. Because the only thing that tells you whether your messaging is working is a real person responding to it in the real time, right? And I'm going to give you in a moment an option to spend a little bit of time on your messaging and positioning. But for the most part, this is the answer. So if you're not having the conversations, you want to get good at refining the way that you're asking them for those conversations, refining the value you're offering to the end clients to get their attention to have those conversations, or to the end recipient, we should say, the potential client. This is not about overall positioning and messaging and your elevator pitch and your capability deck. This is very specific to how can you make the start of a conversation or the request for a conversation as valuable to the other person, to the ideal client, in a way that they would say yes. That's the question that you need to answer. It's not about overall messaging and positioning, it's about that specific thing. And then separately, if you're having enough conversations, you're hitting your pipeline math, but they're not converting, the question is not, again, the question is not whether your positioning is clear or your messaging is clear. No one's buying something because of your elevator pitch. It's what you're doing on those calls. The question underneath the question is, what were you actually doing in those conversations? Were you uncovering their real challenges? Were you asking questions that got them talking about what's actually broken in their business, not the surface version, the root cause underneath? Were you creating enough opportunity for them to articulate the problem before you offered anything? Or were you fitting into the mold that so many consultants do, which is explaining what you do, walking them through your process, and hoping the fit becomes obvious? That's what you want to look at. Because at the end of the day, when you're hiding behind messaging instead of taking action, the cost is obvious. Number one, your pipeline, when you're avoiding the actual activity of being in action versus working on your messaging and thinking you need to do that in order to fill your pipeline. Obviously, the impact is on your pipeline, but the less obvious cost is a delayed diagnosis. The more you can have conversations with people, the more you can get better at the very simple task of offering a conversation in a way that's valuable to your ideal client, in a way that makes them say, oh, yes, can we talk tomorrow? Not, oh, yeah, maybe someday. Can we talk tomorrow? That's the only question that you want to be asking yourself to start with. Nail that. Then you get on the call. Then you want to nail your process to understand what they do, what they're facing, what they care about. And then you can describe what you do in context to that. Another cost is a plateau. You get stuck relying on word of mouth, feeling unclear, feeling like it's difficult to uncover leads. And so you just stay stuck where you are. If you don't solve this, or if you keep solving the wrong problem of trying to refine your messaging instead of getting into action, talking with people and figuring out how to message on the fly in the moment, in the context that other person's, that ideal client is giving you. And ultimately, the huge cost is your identity cost. Because the more you tell yourself, I can't describe what I do, I'm not clear on what I do, my messaging and positioning needs work, the more you put yourself in the identity of someone who's starting out, even if you've only been in business for a few months or you've been in business for 30 years, it doesn't matter. The more you tell yourself, my messaging and positioning isn't clear, the more you keep yourself in that mode of a beginner, and the more it impacts your confidence, your ability to, and bravery to go after bigger deals and more exciting deals for different types of pricing. So now let's talk about, there are a couple of times where it is messaging. So we've been focusing all this time on it's not messaging, get into action and figure out your, refine as you go. But there are times where it is the messaging. Oftentimes that looks like way too broad. This could mean, I talk to people that are like, well, I work with CEOs of mid-sized tech companies. I mean, that's so broad. So in some cases, your messaging might need work. And a couple of signals are maybe there's just consistent confusion across multiple conversations with your ideal client. Or you're getting inbound leads, but they're just the wrong title, the wrong type of organization. It's off. It's not the ideal client. Those are the signals that you, or truly you genuinely can't articulate what you do. That one's a lot more of a gray area. Cause so, like I was just describing to you, so often I hear, oh, I can't describe what I do. And then I ask someone what they do and I get it completely. So be careful with that one. But at the end of this episode, I'll tell you exactly what to do about all of this. If it truly is a messaging problem, we can address it in a way that's super contained and doesn't get you back into that scenario with a plateau or dependency on people making the connection for you and referring people to you. If you have that problem, hang on, we'll address it. But also know that likely, even if you have a messaging problem, which is probably 5% of the people out there, even if you have that, we can nail that here really quickly. I'll tell you how to do it in a minute. And then we want to work on this other piece of this. And that is addressing why you're actually not having enough conversations and how to convert more of those conversations into next steps. If it's not messaging and positioning that does that, then what is? So now that we've gone through this and you understand that 95% of the time, or 99% of the time, even, that messaging is not the issue, that your pipeline is actually improved when you get into action and you address this situation of not having enough conversations or not having conversations that convert. The question becomes, what should you do now? What should you do instead? And let's break this down in three buckets, okay? And let's take the simple one off the table. If you genuinely cannot articulate what you do, genuinely, again, I find most of the time this is not the case, but let's just give it to you for now. Let's imagine that it is. Then give yourself one working session, 90 minutes maximum, to write your clear positioning, to write your clear messaging, who you help, what problems you solve, what changes for them. Write it all out, and then you're done. There's no more working or perfecting or any of that. So if you truly believe that your messaging is the blocker and you need to get it more clear, then set yourself a timer, 90 minutes max, write it all out. Write it all out. That's it. And then you're done. You make an agreement with yourself that after that 90 minutes, that it's completed, that there's no more redoing, rejiggering. It's all about that 90 minutes and whatever you can accomplish in that point in time. Okay. So that's the first thing. Let's take that off the table. The likelihood of that being your challenge, again, the point of this episode is low. But if it is truly your challenge, then just give yourself that 90 minutes timer and agree with yourself that whatever's completed in that moment, in that period, is good enough and will get you into the next part, which is addressing the other two things. If you're not having enough conversations, your job is to create the conversations with people who could plausibly be clients or introduce you to clients starting today. Not when your messaging feels ready or better or clearer, but today. Because having those conversations is what creates the clarity. You don't get clear and then have the conversations. You could make the perfect messaging that if you put it in AI, even without it hallucinating, it would say, oh, this is A+ work. And then you go out there and it doesn't resonate in the market. It doesn't resonate with who you're talking to. So if you're not having enough conversations, your job is to create the conversations by figuring out what is the most valuable conversation starter you could offer to the people you want to meet with. For some people, it will be, hey, we haven't talked in a long time. I would love to catch up. And then you're truly catching up with them, understanding what they're doing, how they are, what's new in their world, what keeps them up at night, sharing what you do. And if it makes sense, offering for a second call to walk through how you might help them because you understand what their challenges are, not because you're pitching something. Your job is figuring out how to get people to say yes to conversations with you. The other way to look at this is if it's someone you don't know very well, what could be the most valuable thing that you could offer to them to create a yes to a conversation? I hear so often things like, well, PE firms won't network. People in PE firms, principals in PE firms don't respond to cold messages. CEOs of large healthcare organizations don't accept cold outreach. Like I could go on and on about all of what I just said about why we think that our target won't respond to some form of meeting with you, even though they've never known you. I can give you 1,000 examples of scenarios where consultants are getting on the calendar of those decision makers. And it's not because of their messaging and positioning and their value proposition. It's because they found one really amazing way to get the attention of those decision makers, something that's valuable to those decision makers in the moment, right? You're falling behind on your AI strategy. If you haven't done X, Y, or Z, I'd love to walk through what X, Y, or Z is and see what we can do to get you into a leading position with AI, not a laggard position. whatever it is that would resonate with your particular ICP, with your ideal client, and that they would drop everything to rearrange their calendar to meet with you. That's what we're talking about. If you're not having enough conversations, solve that problem. If you are having conversations, but they're not converting into next steps, this is not about your messaging and positioning. This is you asking yourself, what's going on in my calls? Why am I understanding what's going on? Am I uncovering a challenge that this person I'm talking with has in their organization? Am I asking questions that surface the real problem, like the challenge underneath the one that they led with? Or are you just explaining what you do and hoping they connect the dots, throwing spaghetti at the wall and expecting them to clean it all up? It's your job. It's your job to lead them through a process that uncovers their challenges, that demonstrates to them how they can be solved, and to offer relevant solutions that are valuable and compelling to them. It's not their job to understand what you do and connect the dots to what they need. And you ask yourself after each call, did I learn more about their situation than they learned about my process? That's a simple question, right? So, what to do instead is to understand where you're at and apply the approach I just shared with you to that scenario so you can start addressing each of these micro steps by creating micro skills in your repertoire and get better at this process overall. And as we wrap up, I want to share no matter which of those things you work on, you want to also approach it from an effective mindset. Underlying all of this is you generating confidence ahead of time. They're going to react more to how you say something than the words. It's your job, and from a mindset perspective, to think of yourself as someone who can connect what you do to the issues that you uncover as you better understand their issues. Like thinking of yourself as someone who can do this on the fly. It's your job to connect what they need to what you do, not their job to understand what you do and them connect it to your solutions. So that's the alternative here. Instead of falling into the trap of addressing and fixing and the loop there of refinement, it's your job to get as clear as you can on the messaging and positioning if you need to, 90 minutes max, and then go tackle those other two challenges that are likely the more relevant root cause to why your pipeline isn't where it's at right now. It's not messaging and positioning. It is that you're not having enough conversations because you're not offering a valuable reason to have a conversation with you. And then when you get those conversations, you're not converting them into next steps. Again, not because of your positioning, but because you're not connecting the dots for the potential client. All right, my friend, as we wrap up here today, I encourage you to ask yourself, are you avoiding having conversations by pretending you're productive, fixing, creating, overworking your messaging? Why are you doing that? And then which of those levers is most valuable to you? Creating more valuable reasons to meet with you so ideal clients say yes to a meeting. Or if you've got plenty of meetings, then focusing on how do you make those meetings turn into more opportunities. All right. Thanks for joining this week, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.